Control and ControlGlobal.com with another in the Control ARC monthly podcast series. Every month we look at the issues raised in the cover story in Control with the insights of ARC's analysts. For this month, September 2012, the topic is process simulation. With me today is Dick Slansky, Senior Analyst for Product Lifecycle Management and Industry at ARC. He focuses on PLM, engineering design tools, and digital manufacturing. Dick, thanks for talking to us today.
Hi, glad to be here.
All right, let's get started. And first question is, from your guys' perspective, what are the main types of process simulation? What are they used for, and mainly, how have they been evolving lately?
Right. I think that we need to provide some definitions of some of the terms here. The word process simulation could mean a lot of different things depending on how it's applied and so forth. From the pure process and the process industry perspective, process simulation are applications and technology that involve the process itself. In other words, what goes through the pipes, whether it's chemicals or oil and gas area or whatever. It's process simulations at a dynamic kind of simulation. Now, what I'm really seeing and what I'm really going to be talking about here is simulation from the perspective of a 3D virtual simulated environment, if you will. And the applications then would be the training for the operations, simulating the operations, training for the operators themselves within the environment and so forth, and it would be using tools and applications that allow the users to create these 3D virtual models and simulation of the actual physical plant and all the equipment and the assets within the plant.
Okay. Because data processing is increasingly cheap and powerful, are simulations less costly and able to go into the field or into applications that couldn't afford them before?
Well, in a word, I would say yes. It's more accessible to be able to do these kinds of simulations. This hasn't really got much to do with the actual data processing resources per se. A lot of the simulation technology today is based on some of the same applications that the gaming industry uses. So in terms of processing power, that's really not an issue so much anymore. We're seeing the introduction of mobility and mobility devices within the plants, within the facilities, out in the field and so forth, where the operator or the user would be able to run the simulation or be able to render the 3D virtual environment on some type of mobile device, a smartphone or a tablet or something. So given the amount of processing power that we have compared to a decade or so ago, it's amazing what we can run. So these mobile devices have a computing capability to run these 3D virtual applications. Also, in terms of computer resources, I think you need to make the distinction between what we call realistic simulation for product tests. This is the CAE space. So yes, that really doesn't have much to do with this notion of creating a virtual environment, 3D virtual plant that you could use to simulate the plant and the operations of the equipment. This is simulated. Realistic simulation for product tests would involve the whole area of CAE, or computer-aided engineering, and this would be like finite element analysis, computer computation of fluid dynamics, and so forth. And this is where they're doing very specific product tests on very complex mesh models, and these things could and do use a lot of computing resources, and sometimes these things have to run overnight, so forth, depending. So we're not really talking about that. So in terms of computing resources, what we are talking about is the ability to create and to run these simulations where we virtually simulate or model the physical environment and the physical plant.
Okay. So are some of the different traditional types of simulation being brought together? And, if so, why is this happening and where is it occurring most?
Yes, I think they probably have been brought together more so by the process industries themselves. The process industries themselves that provide these types of simulation tools and so forth, and companies that do that type of process control and so forth, and DCS systems, like an Inventus or like an ABB or like an Emerson or Honeywell, so forth. They have dynamic process simulation applications and tools, as I said earlier, that have been able to simulate what actually happens, of the product that goes through the pipes and so forth like that. Now, they also have totally immersive 3D environments for training, where they can take the operators and put them into this immersive 3D environment. They put the helmet on and everything, and they can actually move through the simulated 3D virtual plant. But at the same time, they can integrate some of these other pure process simulation tools that they have, so they can actually incorporate that data from actual data that's process information from the plant itself into some of the 3D immersive training. So there's a type of integration that goes on there. And then you move out into the area where some of the PLM companies are offering tools today that will enable the users to just go out and completely emulate or virtually simulate and create a 3D virtual model of their entire plant very accurately. And they can use this for training. You can use this to run scenarios, safety scenarios, event scenarios in case something goes wrong and how they would deal with it. You do all kinds of different types of what-ifs in the event of some kind of an event and how to deal with it, how to mitigate it, and then just go through routine maintenance and maintenance procedures and so forth in the simulated actual virtual environment. So this is where I think you're going to see the adoption, is in the area of maintenance and operations. And especially as we start to see more and more of these really complex, say Upstream Oil is a great example, complex platforms. You look at an offshore drilling platform, it would be very costly and very expensive for them to go through a training process on the physical platform and take all their operations guys out there and start training them, especially while it's being built or put together. When they have actual virtual models of the entire drilling platform with all the equipment and all of the whole physical environment, they can start training their operations people long before they ever have to deploy them out on these really remote places out in the middle of the ocean someplace. So they're definitely looking at that, and it's definitely going to be advantageous to certain areas of the energy industry, and especially upstream oil and gas.
Okay. To what extent, then, is maybe process simulation overlapping with maybe advanced process control or model predictive control and some other optimization methods?
Well, again, as I said, predictive control, modeling the actual processes. We're already seeing that some of the process tools companies that are beginning to integrate these within their training environment. So that's already happening. You probably won't see this being done from the PLM guys because they don't have that process background. But they do have very, very advanced and very sophisticated tools to build complete 3D simulated environments. So you're going to see a mix, I would say, probably as the adoption of this continues. You're going to see companies who are going to use tools to build these completely 3D simulated environments so they can go through training operations. And then you're going to see the incorporation of pure process simulation tools like predictive process operations tools and things like that in the mix. So I think it's going to be a kind of a combination coming from different areas, different companies and different technologies.
Yeah. Are simulations then turning around fast enough with their data to perhaps aid operations in real time or close to it? And, what kind of applications might that be happening in?
There probably will be a move towards trying to incorporate a certain amount of the real time. If what you mean by real time is once you turn on the operations, you start running the systems and so forth. If you have a simulated virtual environment, say, model already built of the plant, it's not too much of a stretch to think that you're probably going to be able to take and run some real-time scenarios. Now, if you mean real-time from the sense that the operations is complete and it's up and running, and so let's just take actual data and let's run the pure process simulation of what's going through the pipes, so to speak, and bring it over into this simulated environment. Yeah, I think you're going to see more of that as they get better at this kind of stuff and start to integrate these things.
How are process engineers benefiting from the newly combined simulation tools, and maybe how can others do the same?
Well, the adoption of these 3D virtual simulation tools is currently focused, as I indicated earlier, it's pretty focused on operator training and maintenance at this point in time. So what we're really talking about here is something that's targeted towards the operations folks rather than, say, the engineering design guys. Now, the engineering design guys who use the tools, you take an EPC that would use tools from, say, plant design tools from an Intergraph or an Aviva or something like that. They don't typically today hand over all of those models and all that 3D stuff that they design the plant in to the operations guys. You don't typically see that handover taking place. Honestly, the operations guys, the operations side of the business, the owner-operators, say, of the refinery or the petrochem plant or whatever it is, typically still receive a lot of data and a lot of information, and a lot of the models and drawings are still in 2D rather than 3D. And it's still pretty much that way. What we're beginning to see is the tool providers, the engineering tools suppliers, are starting to target the owner-operator of the plants, rather than they also target, obviously, the EPCs and the engineering design, but they're also starting to target the owner-operators with the same tools that the designers use. So now, in some cases, almost 50% of their business is targeted towards the owner-operators. So you're seeing the owner-operator side of the business having access to much more of these 3D models, much more of the 3D tools, and what goes with that, of course, is the ability to actually build these virtual 3D environments that they can use to run their operations, to run their maintenance, and to perform their training procedures.
Cool. Well, Dick, that was some terrific analysis. You certainly made the virtual world of simulation a bit more real for us. Thanks for talking to us today.
No problem. I enjoyed it.
This has been another in the monthly Control ARC podcast series. I'm Jim Montague. Thanks for listening.